Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Down to Business. Quite privileged today. Got two, I'm going to say, legends of not only the hunter wine industry, but the wine industry in general, and some very successful business people in their own right. And today joining me is Cole Peterson and Brian McGuigan. And Cole, a bit of a background, started Peterson's, I'll say Peterson's winery, but empire, if you like, in 1971. First vineyard was produced, or first crop was produced in 1981. Started from a tractor shed, it's fair to say, and converted that since into various vineyards, growth every year. The Champagne House, for anyone's been up the Hunter, bottling lines, properties, accommodation, restaurants, and here today still going just as hard. So we'll get a few points from Colin in a minute. And Brian needs no introduction. Started Wyndham Estate in 1970 and sold in 1990. In 1991, he started Brian McGuigan Wines, started as a public company. I think the amazing story was in 1993, it was doing zero turnover, to 2005 doing $458 million in turnover. Sold out in 2006 and has done many more things since. And ironically, the two of these gentlemen now in business in many ventures together, and it's great to welcome them here to have not only a good chat, we're good friends, but realistically we can learn a lot from the many years in business. I'm sure many mistakes and many funny stories that we'll share over a wine, so hopefully you get a lot out of it. But welcome, gents.
Thank you, Andrew.
How you been? You've gotten through a pretty tumultuous couple of years, so tell me how things are.
Well, I think that it's been tough, as you said, but COVID has certainly changed the way that we live and the way that we eat and the way that we drink and the way that we visit certain areas, particularly the vineyards, has suffered as a result of people being concerned about getting the virus and spreading the virus, and therefore they have not been buying wine from the cellar door the way they have in the past. Mind you, that doesn't mean to say they have stopped drinking wine. They have, but Andrew, they have been doing it through their local bottler or their local hotel. So the wine industry sales are still bloody good, and export is still good for those of us who deal with English-speaking countries. It's so much easier than dealing with the others. And so that's how we built one hell of a lot of business in the export trade, because my old company really still exports about 70% of what it produces. Only 30% is sold in Australia. Australia is very, very stiff competition. And you've got to eke out a role that's unique to yourself. Otherwise, some of the other boys will roll you over.
Yeah.
And it's tough. Liquor business is tough. And there are more and more restrictions coming on, which makes it even tougher. But for those who want to fight and develop new products, interesting products, we are in the fashion business, in the wine business, because we have to react to what people want, not what we, the winemakers, think that they should have. And there's a big difference normally between the two. And so we have to be out there, understand what they want, and make sure that through our process, that's what we give them.
Yeah, I'll come back to that point, but it's a very good one. And before we get too far into it, and Cole, how are you going? What's the vintage like?
Oh, vintage this year's been disastrous. We had too much rain at the wrong time, or the rain kept going. So we basically lost 80% of our reds in the Hunter. We probably lost 60% of our reds at Mudgee. Whites look good. Every time I talk to the boys in Armadale, the grapes look fine up there, but they're not going to get ripe because of the very cool growing season they've had, also being 1,000 metres high. So every time I talk to the boys, I get off the phone, pick up the phone, ring with contacts in South Australia and buy another heap of grapes down there for this year.
But it's ironic, you come with those comments, and to many viewers, they're probably sitting there going, oh, Jesus Christ, life's not good, but you got a big view that, well, as you said just recently, when one door closes, another one opens.
Exactly. I mean, you don't sit there and say, well, I'll wait 12 months. We have to be proactive. We have to adapt. I think COVID has, even though it's been very bad, also had a major impact on our business, but also made us adapt very quickly. And we'll come out of it a lot stronger than what we went into COVID. So with different, same philosophy about the quality wine we make, etc. But our sales are up through the roof.
Yeah, and I think it's many of the viewers who watch this are small businesses, SMEs, etc. And we try to give a bit so they can learn from. And you guys will probably forget more than I know. So you've been around for a long time. Not that you haven't still got that spring in your step and wanting to do more, but I think some of these points that you are alluding to already, let alone when we get through our questions, key things for people to look at. We can't dwell on things. We're in the fashion game, as you said, and the one you said, Brian, about I see many businesses set up and they set up for their dream and what they want, but they forget that key thing about who's buying and what do they want.
So important. I mean, selling, the money coming in the door is just so important to the future of your business. You've got to have that cash coming in on a regular basis, and otherwise you just can't build a business. Particularly, Andrew, in the wine industry, because it's such a long-term business, because you've got to grow your grapes, make your wine, mature your wine, and then sell it. So for a lot of products, Colin, it's 3 or 4 years before you're selling some of that produce. Not so with white, because white is much quicker, but certainly with red. It takes quite some time for the reds to mature, to be blended, bottled, and then get over the bottling operation and the filtration and all that takes place to make sure that our consumer gets a product that's always perfectly clean and beautiful to drink. It takes some doing, and we must make sure that all that's okay.
And I think the other aspect with that, but is, and not just in the wine game, in business generally, but there are some brilliant winemakers in your industry that still haven't got a very good business, or don't see through the hard times. You guys have seen many years of success, to be fair. That's some of the things we want to uncover as to what you need to look beyond what you actually produce or what you actually do.
Yes, well, there can be lots of people who are very accomplished at their art, but then can't sell it and therefore make a gross profit, let alone a net profit. And therefore, that's why we need to be a family of professionals. We, of course, need to be good in viticulture, good in the chemical process of making wine, then of bottling that wine, then of packaging the wine, and then of selling it, and then of administering the whole process. So we've got a very complex sort of life, and that's why we need people like you, because any businessman who's worth his salt and is going to make $1 has to have good people around him, and he's got to have a good administrator, accountant type person sitting there with him to make sure that he doesn't go awry, because you've got to keep up to date with what's happening in the world of business, and it's too much for winemakers to be experts in every other area of activity.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think one of my next questions, and I'll start with you, Cole. Give me a bit of background, give the viewers a bit of background on, I gave you a bit of a very quick intro on since you've been in the wine game. What about the upbringing and how you got ultimately into starting a vineyard?
I suppose my father was a chemist, it was in the Second World War. By the time he was demobilised out of the Air Force, all the Air Force settlements, or like the soldier settlements, had disappeared, gone. So the Air Force put my father through pharmacy, but Dad's whole ambition was to be a farmer. So as soon as he finished his pharmacy course, he went out to a place called Candos, it was a one chemist shop town. Spent 3 or 4 years there, then moved to Toronto, was a one chemist shop town. As soon as he had made enough money, he wanted to be a farmer, so he had to be within 1 hour drive of his chemist shops in case the chemist got sick, because by law you have to have a pharmacist there. So for many weekends, I think 2 years, we looked at either Saturday, Sunday or both days, different properties. He walked onto the property at Mount View and bought it, but the intention was to run cattle, not to run grapes. So years later, after running the cattle successfully for many years, the size area he had of land didn't really mean that the cattle were viable. At that time, the wine or grape boom has just started, so Dad said, well, I'll plant a few grapes and that'll pay for the lady look after my cattle for me. And that's how we basically, by default, got into the wine game. So we planted the first few grapes in McWilliams, and I wanted to make it what I did. So I would take a few grapes every year and I'd send to different wineries to get made into wine for me in that first 10-year period. So we know we could make good wine. I suppose the classic one was, as you drive through our front gate, there's a Currajong tree and there was 10 rows of grapes there, so I said to my parents that I would buy off them and get wine made. I sent 5 rows to Murray Rolson, 5 rows to Ed Duo. We won the Hunter Valley Wine Show, New South Wales Wine Show and Canberra Wine Show with My Red.
Yeah, right.
So to me it was always the quality of the fruit is what stands out. So you can have the best winemaker in the world, and I say to my blokes now, I don't employ you for the good seasons, I employ you for a year like this where you're going to turn shit into something drinkable. So we knew we could make good wine, and then in 1981, with a few of the tanks I had made, we made our first vintage. 2 years later, we stopped selling McWilliams, or they stopped buying our grapes. 2 years later, we did a bigger crush than McWilliams, and went from there. But we always aimed from day one not to be the biggest, to be the best. And the philosophy was, well, 2 things. If we can't sell it, we've got to drink it, so we'll make what we like ourselves. It's sort of the reverse way of doing things. And the other thing was, we said, once we put our name on the bottle, regardless of what variety of grapes, whether else the quality of that wine has to be very, very good. So if we do have made mistakes, plenty of them, but you don't see the mistakes we make.
But you learn from the mistakes.
Oh, my word, you never stop learning.
And Brian, what about the same question to you?
With what emphasis do you need?
I guess what led you to, I mean, we said you opened Wyndham in 1970.
Yeah.
But what sort of, was it a family tradition? What brought you into this space?
Well, my story is a little similar to Cole's, and could I salute his father, because he was a fantastic bloke, lovely bloke, who, by the way, my father talked to about growing grapes.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so Dad was in the wine industry. He worked for Penfolds Wines. It was a tradition that your family followed you into Penfolds Wines, which I did. In 1960 is when I started, and then I worked for them as a winemaker for basically 10 years, and built up the winery in the Upper Hunter out at Wybong, and we built the winery there and did all that, viticulture and winemaking. And then I could see that the old company wasn't going as well as it used to go, and it was sold, by the way, in 73. And so I had gotten out in 70, and people who then bought my father's winery then said, would you like to come on board as a partner? And so from that point we built Wyndham up into different to Cole. I followed a different path because I knew with a number of people that we had to support that I needed good turnover and a rather big business. And so we worked at that feverishly and encouraged lots of people to come to our cellar door facilities. And we built it up and produced some well-known products that were well-known across Australia. And that's why someone came onto the share market and raided us in 1989, and we were forced really to sell out in 1990. And that's when we started again. Because I think second time around, if you understand what's happening around you and make sure that you keep an eye out for all the good things and the bad things, then next time around you'll be very careful and hopefully be more successful as a result of not doing the wrong things. So it's a matter of practice and who does what, when, how and why. And so The company then built up and built up. Over the years, we took over company after company after company and got our turnover to, as you said, about $460 million. And we were making $50 million the year that I then had a stroke and a heart attack. And they said, because our business, as I said to you, was mainly export, so we were never out of planes, my wife and myself. And so we're always travelling and always under pressure because you had to bring the bacon home for the investor in your company. Cole's got a family company, which makes it a lot easier because he can explain to his wife over a lovely cocktail or whatever he's eating, or nice beef, that, mother, the money this year's not going to be as good. Sorry, baby. Sorry. But
Exactly.
I couldn't do that because I found
Third parties.
I found one of the turn-ons of my job was actually standing there once a year. I looked forward to that, particularly when I had the money in the bag. So I look forward to that, to be able to stand up there and say, we've done it for you, we've done it. We've had another 40% increase in sales, and the GP has been maintained or increased. And to tell people that, and to have their eyes light up, and people stop you in the street, because we had a lot of shareholders, people stop you in the street and say, oh gee, it's going well. And they were also people who were good ambassadors for your product, being public listed. But we understand one another's position about a private company versus a public company. Public company is good because it's great for the person who's the promoter, because at the end of the day, you can cash your chips without having a terrible effect on the value of the business. But when you are the man, and you're the only man who people know about, it's very difficult to sell that on. And it's very difficult for your family if they're forced to sell that on following your demise.
Yeah, and there's pros and cons to obviously any structure and any different business model. But I guess the main thing, and what you've just told both of you, is to understand what your business model is, and to make sure that you are staying true to it. Because if you try and you're set up for one, you're trying to dabble in the other, it's not going to work.
No.
But and then one of the things I'll just pick up on what you said, which too many people don't do this, but reflection and looking at what you could have done better, or maybe what did work and why, etc. A lot of people I work with say we build a career on mistakes, and there's nothing wrong with that because we learn very quickly. But too many people don't actually look at it and make the same mistake again. Yeah. So it leads me to my question about you followed paths on family, etc. And I think I know the answer to this, but what kind of business education did you have?
Interesting. My father, being a pharmacist, is actually quite astute. He had other businesses as well, so he would look for a little niche market to do with chemist shops, and he set up an import company to import stuff out of Asia instead of going through drug houses, Australia, etc. in those days. So he set up a chemist buying group, which still runs today. So he was always looking for something new, and the other thing he would do is that once they got up and running, and I'm very much in the same ilk, I completely lose interest the same as my father did. So once it was up and running, Dad had put someone there to do what needed to be done. He'd go and find the next thing to go and do. And I'm definitely that same ilk, that once it's up and running, it's working good, let's go and find something else to do. So I then have, by doing that, has allowed me to employ some very, very good people who've been with me for 30 or 40 years who've been in business. So we have very, very low or no staff turnover in our senior people, never had in 40 years. And if I fall off the perch tomorrow, the business will still run because they know what they've got to do. It's a bit compartmentalised in the sense of the vineyards, the bottling lines, the wineries, the selling, etc., etc. But for every wrong reason it works. And if I do get crook, whatever, it will run for 12 months, 2 years, 3 years without any real hiccups. So we don't aim for much growth. We just aim for 5% a year. Probably running at 15% at the moment, which is too much. Because, as Brian was saying, it takes especially our biggest sales now are red wines, that to make those good reds, by the time you grow the grapes, make the wine, put it in the barrels, bring it out, bottle it, keep it there for another 12 months, 2 years, 3 years. You're looking at 7 or 8 years. And it's not 7 or 8 years of wine in a bottle, it's 7 or 8 years of our staff and my life in a bottle. So we make that as a point. That's why I was saying you only ever see our wine when our label on it guarantees the quality. You don't see the stuff we're not happy with. And so our philosophy has been different. Than we were never interested in growing. If I had to make a decision, I used to always joke I was a great communist. I work in a 5-year plan. That okay, in 5 years' time, this is where I want that business to be, and then that business supports the next business, and so it may be. So it was not a matter of, other than keeping the bank happy, the taxation department happy, and buying my wife a new dress, etc. occasionally, we're all happy.
So from your point of view, it was more having, you fortunately had your father that was quite astute, as you said, but to me, I hear that as a very good mentor. Yeah.
I remember he used to say to me, whatever you do, don't go and sell to the big companies, because they own you, you don't own them.
Well, that's a good segue to Brian.
Yeah.
And what about, from you getting into business? Because, the point I'm getting at, we see a lot of people that go into business because they're good at what they do. But it's a whole new ball game when you've actually got to make a business out of what you do.
Yes, because you're good at one component of the total business, not of all the things that we've both talked about, maturation, viticulture, all those sorts of things that you have to worry about. For my own part, I was trained as a winemaker in South Australia by Schubert. And
that's the maker of Grange Hermitage. So you had the best tutor you could have in Australia, and don't forget in those days there was no such thing as a winemaking school, especially at Penfolds. You were taught in-house. So Brian was taught by his father and Max Schubert.
That's right.
So Brian was involved in making the first Grange.
Yeah.
So don't be modest, Brian.
Yeah. I am, Colin. You know how modest I am. But I didn't have any business training. I hardly knew what gross profit was, but soon learned it's pretty simple to understand that. You buy an X and sell it whatever you can, 5X if you can. But
it's amazing you say that that's simple. I think you're probably downplaying that, and you've picked it up or been helped along the way, because the amount of people, that simple thing they get wrong in understanding the difference between gross profit and markup.
Yeah.
And you get it wrong, and it can cost you a lot of money.
Yes, you're in the poo, aren't you? Yeah, that's right. Well, maybe just had some natural capacity, as Colin has, to understand that you add up all the costs and make sure that you've got a margin that's good enough. But at the same time, you've got to make sure you deliver, not just mark up the cost. You've got to deliver a quality that is in step with the price that you're charging. And this is what the industry, the wine industry, and many other industries are all about, because people are looking for the best value for money, not just the best wine, the best value for money. And so that's why people regard some brands as better than others and other brands as good better than others. And that's why we all are constantly looking to make better wine, so that we can deliver to our consumer what he considers to be a great value for money.
And I think that's a great point you raised, and I was going to allude there myself. You talk about what they consider to be great value, because too many businesses, it's about what they want to produce, as you said before, or the rest of it. And sometimes, you know yourself, you've been out with people and they've selected the wine, you're probably thinking, oh, geez, that's ordinary. But in their eyes, they think it's great, so let them buy it. So what is that value?
Yeah, but Andrew, it's no different really to when people are buying a car, a handbag, pair of boots, shoes, whatever. Because people want value for money. They worked hard to make their money, and so they want to make sure that they get what they perceive to be a bargain. And if you constantly offer that, well, then your product will sell well.
And you've got to understand as a business owner what that value is in the eyes of the beholder, I guess.
Because if you take them for a ride, as Cole's been saying, see, if he doesn't think that it's good enough for his label, he doesn't sell it. he decants it and
It doesn't even get to the bottling stage.
doesn't get there. No.
We've had grapes delivered from the vineyards. We've gone and looked and said, yeah, they're so. The grapes arrived at the winery. We took them straight to the back and dumped them. Because your first loss is your best loss.
Yep.
You then have got to turn it into wine.
Yeah.
Make very average wine. Then you've got to bottle it. You put your label on it. Then you've got to sell it. And all you do is ruin your reputation.
Yep.
Yeah.
But you can do that on a small scale like we are. You can't do that on a scale that Brian was. You have to have a market for all the product.
Yeah.
And which are different price points, etc.
So I might just reiterate a couple of the points you've raised there. You know, that reputation, okay, about value.
Thanks.
You know, this is probably the first video we're having where we're actually tasting the consumer products. This is great.
Well, I think it's good.
But I think also one of the key things you said is coming into business, you didn't have a business background. And you've mentioned already, Brian, having the right people around you, and Cole said the same at his senior team. So whether that's internal, whether that's external, you know, I often say having a coach, we have coach for sporting teams, we have coaches for kids, coaching in business, what's different? The problem is these days is that everyone's a coach, so you've got to then decipher through it. Or the other key one is the mentor. And I think someone being independent, someone who's trodden that way before, may not be right every time, but can give you a bit of guidance for small business owners and even large business owners. But to me, that's just a must.
Of course it is. It's just like Cole's saying about having the right winemaker, the right viticulturalist. You must have the money man there right by your shoulder, right there. Not to take over things, because a lot of accountants and administrators want to take over the whole bloody shooting match. They need to be in their spot, but the person who's out the front has got to make sure that he does the main job. The main job is selling the stock at a gross profit that's right for the business.
Yeah.
And that's why this man here can step into that and make sure that all those criteria are being met and continue to be met.
Beautiful. So I guess we might have touched on a few of these things around what you love and the rest of it, and you know, you've been doing it for a long time, but after all these years, how do you continually stay ahead of the game, and whether that be from a market point of view or just your own energy levels?
Well, actually, from my point of view, I think it's more the point that, as I said, we have very, very good, long-serving, loyal staff, and they're as passionate, enthusiastic, and even more so than what I am at times about my own business. And they take pride in what they do. They're very proud people, and they want to make and do and give us the best product we can. So it goes all the way through from the Jamie growing the grapes, or Ross growing the grapes, and Rob, and into the wine with the wine making team, and then to the bottling line. So we have our own bottling line because the first couple of wines we had done commercially, they were stuffed up. So what do? You got to put your own bottling line in. So we control our own business all the way through, from probably 60% of our grapes through to the finished product. We sell all our own product. We don't sell to the big liquor chains, so I have my own wholesale company, so I can choose where we sell the wine to. And 90% of our sales are through our cellar door, stroke wine club, etc. And the most important person, you know, ultimately in my company, is those sales girls and boys at that front counter, making sure that when someone walks in that door, they are looked after. Because it's like a restaurant. You go there once, you can have 100 good meals, one bad one, remember the bad one. When people come to the cellar doors, they go to 4 or 5 cellar doors. If you're then lucky enough that they will come in and try your cellar door, you're going to make sure that your staff are quiet and look after them, because they kick one out of the cellar doors out the door, and we become one of their regular ones they go to. So you're always making sure, and this my staff are very, very good at, is looking after the customer. And that's the experience they want. They can go to a lot of the liquor shops and buy wine at a price. One of the first questions they ask us is, can we buy your wine at Dan Murphy's? So they're away for the weekend, got rid of the kids, up with a group of friends, they want to buy something they can take back to Sydney, or they have a dinner party together next to. Remember we went to that place called Peterson, those bloody idiots there, blah, 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 they tell the story for us. So we've never advertised. It's always word of mouth and just having a good product. So ultimately, if you don't, I use the analysis, you have 2 cogs, you take one tooth off, the whole lot stops. So as an integrated vertical business where we control everything ourselves, and it works. And we took one of those teeth off. If the grapes weren't that good of quality, we don't make the wine. If the so-and-so goes wrong, So ultimately, we're just lucky and have been very fortunate over the years that we've made far more right decisions than we've made wrong decisions. And don't get me wrong, we've made some classic blunders.
But don't forget that what he does, and what we all do, I think, is to make sure that each one of those departments has a structure within it where that person gets a real kick when he's very successful, because he's seen as an important cog in the whole wheel. And that's what
empowerment.
That's what you must share with your staff. Make them feel as though they are just the keys and they are the important people. And I've said that so many times. I haven't said it to the accountants, but because they'll tell the board I'm saying that. But everybody has got to be given job satisfaction, so that when he comes to work, he knows that his boss, who is getting satisfaction by building the business and making it better, selling more wine, selling it at better prices, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Everybody is a partner in that business. And if the heads of each department and the structure underneath them are all feel that they are needed at this job, that they are recognised for the job they're doing, well, they will continue to work for you. You've got to sharpen that up every now and again, because everyone's ambition is different, and you need to appease that from time to time by giving them whatever it is, overseas trips, a new car.
Incentives. Yeah. No, I think it's a great one. I think without even probably realising, you probably just covered off the balanced scorecard. And, I always work with businesses where a lot of them try to manage their business off just the finance results and say, well, at the end of the day, the finance is an outcome of the people being right, the customers and product, and your processes and systems, which you've just, in a few words, reiterated. So it's very good. I guess looking at your industry, you're in a very competitive industry. Yeah, as you said, Australia is extremely competitive. And I'm not trying to get you to, be too humble here. I'm being honest. How have you managed to stand out? I mean, you've mentioned customer satisfaction and our quality of our product, but everyone's got an opinion. That's probably a good and bad thing. Mm-hmm. But it's not so much of whether people agree, whether you're the best or the brightest or whatever it may be. But the reality is, you've stood the test of time, year in, year out, for a long time. So how have you managed to stand out?
Yes. Well, one thing that has been happening over the last, 20 years, I guess, is the corporatisation of the wine industry. And I think this applies to, Andrew, a lot of industries where people buy out other people and they buy out other people, and it just goes on. And the thing that is key to all this is the passion from the top. Because if you consider yourself to be under peak pressure all the time, which you are certainly in a public company, not so much in a private company, but really if you've got that in your heart, then you will be moving the business along all the time, because that is what turns you on. And as companies have bought out other companies and corporatised, the people who were leading that company are probably a family, and then all of a sudden the acquirer says, I don't need you guys, I can go straight down to the leading accountant, the leading production manager, etc., and decapitate the real brains of the business, the people who offer the value for money, because they know where the market's going. This is of key importance. If you don't know where the market's going, how do you go through, work your way through the shoals so that you don't end up with some rocks through the bottom of your boat? You have to know, the leadership has to come from the person who plots the course. The person who's plotting the course must understand where that market's going. In the main, you get that from the market itself. So it's a matter of interpretation to make sure that you know exactly where the rocks are, and so that you can navigate the flow of the water so that you get through it. And I think that's been a big change. So I would have thought today, that's why he's doing so well. It's easier to do it today than it was 10, 15, 25 years ago, because that was the time when all these acquisitions were taking place. There are so few personalities left in the wine industry that give the wine a character, because you need characters. Because if I can share a little truism with you here, the difference between good and very good wine, or the people who can understand the difference between good and very good wine, are very, very few. So it is the leadership and the commitment to showing that I'm making a value product for you, and this is bloody good, and I've won this prize, I've won that prize, and that gives the consumer the feeling of confidence so that he continues to follow you. People who come for a corporation, by and large, do not have that commitment. They're not allowed to. They are stifled to agree. But that's why family companies can flourish. Mind you, they've got other problems, of course, but nevertheless, with a good leading person, as long as he can engender the next generation to do this exactly the same thing and understand the priorities, then that company will flourish.
That's good.
And I think the other thing is too, as these corporations get bigger and bigger and bigger, it takes a lot longer to get decisions out of them. So I can make a decision in 10 seconds. I remember one time a bloke rang me and said, "Colin, just giving your phone number to a bloke." I said, "Yeah, well, for Dave?" He said, "He wants to set up a bottling line in China." And David worked for a very, very, very large company in Australia, one of the biggest wineries. He said, "If I told this bloke to get in contact with the corporate people, it'd take us 6 months to get up the ladder, and 6 months to come down, that's 12 months, and the answer would be no. If I gave him your phone number, if you won't stuff him around, you'll say yes or no." And the bloke rang me, I went down and saw him in South Australia, said, "Yeah mate, no problem, I don't already paid for it, I'll take 20% equity in the company." We went to China and set up a bottling line. It took us 4 weeks. Way to go. And I think that's the beauty of being small and privately owned. You can make those decisions
On the run.
As you go.
The only thing I'd add to that is rather than be, you making rash decisions, I think for the viewers, you've obviously got a fair bit of experience and a fair bit, you're more talking about there's not a lot of red tape you have to step through or hierarchy. You can make that decision with freedom, but obviously you've got a lot of experience and know what risk to work through. A couple of things just to point out there. I think, we've said various times that know your business model, absolutely know your business model, how it works, know your market, and lead with passion. I think that's a couple of key things there. And make sure that you are spending time, not just in your ivory tower, but with your people and the people, and take feedback.
Yeah. Not only that, bringing this bloke in. This bloke here is... sometimes he's a burden, sometimes, because he doesn't share the same enthusiasm. But if he's a person that you really respect, then it makes you really think twice. Because unless you can convince that guy that this is a really good idea and this is going to be a winner and how it's going to be a winner.
From a numbers point of view, you mean?
Yeah, numbers. But also the other aspects thrown in, because normally an administration, accounting type person brings other things to the table.
Personality, mate, personality.
Well, that's right.
A few
Even though some of them are unshaven.
So I want to touch another point, because as I said at the start, you two have in quite a few ventures together now, and I think it's a thing, hopefully it comes back, but it's a thing from the past where my belief is a lot of people, didn't see each other as competitors, they saw each other as allies or, fellow people we could build together with. Yeah. These days I see someone that goes, "Oh, I won't talk to them because they do what I do," and I'm going, well, they're not even near you, or they're not in the same industry, but they're so scared of it. What's your view on competitors versus allies?
I'll go first in this one. From the big issue, let's say, as far as I'm concerned, our area now has the fact But the personalities, and I include, when we go back, when the industry's boom time started, we had Ryan McGuigan, Murray Tyrrell, Len Evans, and Rosemount. So between those four companies, Hunter Valley grew 4% of Australia's grapes, and they sold 25% of Australia's wine. And they did it because they were all larger-than-life, gregarious, out-there people. The problem we now have is that as more and more corporates are taking over the bigger companies, they're moving to South Australia, A-Bit, Rosemount, whatever, they're closing down, they're now just a label, and the attitude of those big corporations is we'll buy it, run it for 4 or 5 years, double production, and then piss it off and go and buy someone else. Because it's quicker for them to do that and try and build a brand. So what you now have left in the Hunter is a lot of smaller families, like it was 40 years ago. But a lot of those younger people have been brought up in that corporatised world. So to me, the area lacks, and not saying the people, but the area now lacks those personalities. And there's really not a lot of people coming through. You could say, well, they will go into being Brian McGuigans and Murray Tyrrells and Len Evans, etc. And I think the other thing is too that it's more now, there's no big wineries left in the area. They're all smaller family or smaller wineries. They're mainly focused now on their cellar doors, etc. You can hardly buy a bottle of Hunter Valley wine in Sydney restaurants because the South Australians which have to sell their wine outside their cellar doors because they are in the real wine industry, not the tourist industry like we are. They come up here and they market together, they promote together, whatever. The Hunter Valley nowadays doesn't promote as a unit, etc., like they used to in the old days.
Which I think I'd agree, like across any industry for that matter. Yes, you've got to have respect of each other, and yes, you've got to, certain things you might want to protect, but in general, if an industry's going better or an area's going better, surely everyone's going better, generally.
Exactly. That's right, because the successful one sucks the others along in his slipstream. Can I just introduce another issue though, and that is when strong people get together in a venture, just how important, and I know of so many fellows who've gone into business together because they see this guy, this bloke sees this guy over here as having real talent, and this bloke over here sees this bloke as having real talent. But then they have real talent because they're successful. But then when you put them together, you've got the risk of that shattering into 1,000 pieces. Power struggle. Which is very serious. And you have to make sure that you always leave room for your partner in the business to be able to shuffle a bit through his various decisions. Because it's always easy to say, oh, I didn't like that, or I don't like that, because we're all individuals, we're all different, and therefore we've got to make sure that we can make time to talk enough, compare notes enough, always tell the other man what you're doing, particularly if you don't agree on it at the start. Always tell him where you're up to, so that each of you has his own sphere of influence, and together, hopefully, they'll never come together and crash. What you've got to do is use everybody's talents so that you build a better organisation, not an organisation that has internal issues. Because the failure of so many endeavours comes from the inside, not from the outside. It starts inside the company. That's why so many family companies go to the wall, because there's no patron there to make sure that everybody is directed in the right direction.
I think that's a wonderful point on, take that further to everyone knowing their roles and responsibilities and being clear in it from the outset, getting agreement. Yes. I think the other thing is to, often having some form of independence, and as we said before, a mentor, or it could be just someone coming in to play a role of call it council, call it, the ref, whatever it may be, but to give a different perspective.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. That's right. And to make sure that that person is acknowledged by both people. That's why it's a good idea, if both people are on a par, that you have an independent person coming in and sharing. so that that person, and great honesty, absolutely 100% honesty, not hide this little bit over here or hide that little bit over there. Be just absolutely true to your word. And so that's why Colin and I don't think we've had an argument yet, but we've been doing things together now. How long? 5 years?
Yeah,
6 years.
Right. You think I bottled your wine years ago?
Yeah, well, that's right. 10 years, 15 years.
Yeah, 20 years ago.
That's right. Yeah, Col actually leased part of our facilities and put his bottling line in our winery. And that worked so well because you did such a good job.
And it was actually
we paid a lot of money for it.
It was interesting at the time because Brian and I were having a discussion one day and we're talking about the bottling, etc. And Brian said, Colin, he said, the bottling of the wine is something I don't want to do. To me, that is the fixed cost of the business. Well, you're bottling the wine for me, I haven't got to worry about it, I can go out and sell more product.
Value add.
To find him roles where
Play to
Brian was
your...
the master salesman. All he wanted was, yes, there's a bottle, it was the wine in the bottle, he wants it there at a certain time, whatever, on a day to go and get the orders.
Yeah.
And I just have to say to Brian, just because we've got the bottles doesn't mean you've got the wine.
Which, and I mean, you know, you have a laugh, but you raise a really good point. So many small business owners, or I keep saying small business owners, but I think business owners generally don't get their head around. They think they need to be a part of everything. And, you know, if we introduce someone else, or even whether it be insourced or outsourced, it's a cost. And I like to think of it and go, well, hang on, that's a cost. You said a fixed cost.
Fixed cost.
What does that time or what does that extra capacity allow me to do to go and make money for? Yeah.
And is it a specialist area where I don't have the expertise or have very little chance of attracting a person who can be as good as the contractor can be?
Very good. Look, we've spoken a fair bit about customers and how they keep coming back, but you know, I want to talk more about from a business owner's point of view, because some days it can be very hard and some days can be very great, as you know. Your customer come back. What about what makes you keep coming back? What drives you?
Well, from my point of view, I've never worked a day in my life because I've always had the attitude I wake up in the morning, today I'm going to go and accomplish that. And I think that's part of the reason why I've been like my father. When something gets going, is running perfectly, I go and find a new challenge. If I was sitting there doing the same thing day after day, I don't have an office, I can't use computers, I've got an old mobile phone that rings, I answer it, and that's it. And I have people then to give me the information I need to make a decision in my head. And 99% of our decisions that made in our company in my head. To the extent my daughter goes, Dad, I don't know how you do it. So I think it's critical, very important, that you choose what you want to do and what part you want to play in your business. Do you want to oversee the whole lot, or are you just happy to do a little part of it, etc.? You cannot do everything unless you have very, very, very good staff that make 99% of those decisions for you, and you know they're going to make it right.
But it's a good point, because you know, you think, what are you going to business? Generally, it's to make more money or to give yourself a better lifestyle or more time or whatever that may be. Yet too many people go into business and they got struggling for money and they got no time, and it's got them, it's got them locked up. That is because they want to control everything and the egos get in the way, where realistically it should be if you put your investor's hat on, which Brian, you know about. But what about you, Brian?
Well, I think this is a very important part of the business as well, understanding exactly how it all operates. And from my point of view, I always had I tried to imagine at all times standing up in front of the AGM, because that was my test, that was my 100-yard sprint, the final thing. And so I find it even hard now that I'm retired, to sit and watch the television, because I think I'm not doing enough to develop the business. I don't know how I was engendered with a drive to make sure that you did not leave any stone unturned. If I find that I've got a few hours, I feel guilty that I'm not doing anything, it's an amazing feeling, because you just knew for all those 60 years that you had to do better. Do better in every phase. That is, more profit, more honour in terms of the way the wine came off the bottling line, production rate per acre, look of the place, look of your facilities, all those sorts of things. I just knew always that I had a whole host of things behind me pushing me down the track. And I still feel it today, Andrew. It's an amazing thing. And my wife says to me, relax. But I still find it a driving force, even though I've been retired now for 14 years.
Well, it's a funny definition of retirement, mate, but we'll...
Well, I don't work I don't have really any responsibility to get results myself.
He pushes me for that.
As the tenant. It's lovely to flog a tenant along.
Well, I think it's great. I think, understand what your role is and what you want to do. Make sure you got good people around you to still get the task done. And it probably isn't work. It is that drive. So, yeah, it's good.
I suppose I've been very lucky, as I said, I've never worked a day in my life, but I've accomplished a lot because I wanted to have that drive to go and do something.
But Colin, you're always there. See, you're always driving it. You're always going from one place to the other. And you know what has to happen there. That's why you get upset with some of the blokes when they don't do it according to Hoyle.
I get upset
Peterson.
when you tell them 2 or 3 times how you want it done, they don't do it, and it's time for them to move on.
Yeah, that's right.
Because making work then for me.
That's right.
But, my wife and daughter now say to me, my job is to go to Bunnies.
Yeah, but then who do you complain to? You don't complain to your wife and daughter, you complain to your partner. And we can't be responsible. We can't be responsible for your inability to choose your right meal.
So then we'll ask the name. I've only got a couple more for you. And we could talk all day. We obviously could. You've got a lot of experience. But one of the things I want to ask you, and maybe too big a question, but what is your biggest mistake and or lesson as a business owner?
You look at me.
Either one.
I'll go first.
Go for it, Carl.
The biggest mistake that we ever made, they were changing from Semlon used to be in Riesling bottles, the old-fashioned Riesling bottle. And they changed it basically to the Burgundy bottle with the screw caps. And Gary, my winemaker, who's a great old Semlon man, came and said, Colin, I want to go and buy a heap of Riesling bottles, and I want to make a Semlon in the style it was made in the old days for 10, 15 years, and then release it, and it'll be the epitome or whatever. I said, Gary, we're not a Semlon company, we're a Chardonnay company, but if you want to go and do it, you go do it. So over 3 years, he made 3,000 cases of 94, 95, 96 show reserve Semlons, we call them. 10 years, 12 years later, absolutely stunning wines. We sold them for $40 a bottle. I said to Gary, I don't want you to make Semlon, I want you to go and make red. And I want you to make red in a style that's going to age for 10 years. And we didn't do it. So it took, from a financial point of view, it taught Gary a business lesson as to you've got to make what you think people are going to want. From a financial point of view, it probably cost me $5 million.
Yeah. So what was the lesson?
Next time, do what I want to do. No, do a bit of both.
Yeah. Back yourself?
Yes.
Sorry?
Back yourself?
I've always backed myself, Andrew, and I've made, right decisions, wrong decisions. That was just something that I was dead against, but I let Gary say, no, Gary, you do it.
Yeah.
So you want to do it, because you've got to let your staff have that freedom to go and do what they want to do. And I never brought up to Gary and said, never mentioned it again. Years later, we keep selling the Semlon, people come back in and buy it. But a current bottle of white wine is $25 or $30.
Yeah.
With some 15-year-old absolutely stunning Semlons for $45.
Yeah.
Because we were never a Semlon company. If that had been a bottle of Chardonnay, 10, 12, 6, 7, 8-year-olds would have been $70, $80 a bottle.
Yeah.
The bottle that would have been...
That's fashion for you. A change in the fashion he knew that the fashion was X. The winemaker wanted to make Y because it was more akin to what his peers thought was the right thing to do.
Because you know the difference, the story of the joke. What's the difference between God and a winemaker? God knows he's not a winemaker.
True.
And Brian, what's your biggest mistake and/or lesson?
Mine is quite different. There was a good question, and I didn't know what the answer was when I thought about it. But I soon remembered what mistake I made was to have a wrong shareholder. So that's why you've got to be so careful with who you get in bed with. Because once you get in there,
Hard to get out.
how the hell do you get out? And that is something where I then understood that next time I formed a company, I was going to make it a public company so that I didn't have the wrong bloke sitting here.
Yeah.
Not that he was an accountant, he was just a dickhead. and unfortunately, he was the one that had the money. But in some instances, sometimes you need to trust people that they're going to be the same as the way they talk. But in so many cases, they are not. And so that was my biggest mistake. And it brought an end to Wyndham. It caused the end of Wyndham. And so whilst it didn't cost me a lot of money, it did in the fact that I was forced to do something that I didn't want to do because we were on the edge of going further and we were just on the takeoff zone, and we could have done so much better. But we got through all that and knew next time that it was going to be all public company so that we didn't have a pain in the butt at the board meeting and looking for short-term gain when in actual fact you had to lay down the foundations of something that was going to last longer and be more profitable.
But I think Brian's right, because it's not, the wine industry is not for short-term gain. It's not like computer stuff, etc., we have nowadays. It's building a reputation over many years. And we set out from day one to build a reputation for our brand. And our financial gain in our company is not the land we own or anything else. It's actually in the bottles of wine sitting in that warehouse with our label on it.
That's the asset. You're absolutely right.
That's brilliant, gents. I mean, we've only touched on this much. We haven't touched on anything international or diversity in assets or anything. We might have to do another one of these, I think, because there's a fair bit more to cover.
I think we'll do it, but another couple of bottles of wine like that we could. If you can keep us oiled, we'll keep on talking.
I think a couple of things I do want to reiterate, some of the great things you said today is really, understand your business model. Get the right people around you, whether that be internal and external. Take the right advice, horses for courses. Understand what your market wants, the fashion, as you said, your reputation and your asset. Make sure you do have your checks and balances and give your staff a pick-me-up, give them some freedom, make sure they know that they're a key part of it, but also drive with passion and love what you do. I've probably missed a fair bit there, but there's some pretty telling points in that, and I thoroughly appreciate the chat and appreciate your time. I'll say cheers to you, gents.
Cheers. Thanks, Andrew. It's been very, very, very enlightening. Very good.
Good one.
And till the next episode, cheers for joining us.